All right, the road signs are going bilingual. NZTA has already done it with the kura school signs, and they're now considering rolling it out to the motorways, the warning signs, the destination signs.
The vast majority of New Zealanders speak English, and it's really important that those signs are quickly understandable.
Bilingual road signs are not new. They might be new in New Zealand, but if you travel around the world, so many countries have bilingual road signs.
But the debate about bilingualism goes beyond road signs.
National Party leader Christopher Luxon says the level of te reo used in government departments is a problem. He said some people, older people, can't tell the difference between te whatu ora, waka kotahi, and te pukenga.
Under New Zealand First, we will change all the woke virtue signalling names of every government department back to English.
What Waka Kotahi's proposing isn't exactly groundbreaking.
Bilingual signage was first used in Wales in the 70s, quite some time ago.
Yeah, so we're
2023, well behind. And so used in Wales, Scotland, Ireland.
Ki hambasad na heron. No mai hara mai ki te aka aureri o Airangi. Welcome to the Embassy of Ireland.
Kia ora, I'm Tom Kitchen, and today on The Detail, Te Reo Māori, Welsh and Irish are three Indigenous languages that have been suppressed through colonisation. As Aotearoa debates the value of being more bilingual, what lessons can we learn from the revitalisation of the Welsh and Irish languages?
Helo, fe enw I yw Catrin Owen. Dwi'n newyddiadwr I staff a dwi o wreiddiol o Gymru. Hello, my name is Catrin Owen. I'm a journalist at Stuff and I'm originally from Wales.
She's half Kiwi and half Welsh.
I was born and bred in Wales on an island called Ynys Môn, also known as Anglesey in English. My dad is Welsh and grew up on that same island, and it goes back many, many years, centuries. And my mum is a Kiwi, so she was on her OE, was working in England, and they met in England and then moved to Anglesey and had me, and that was 29 years ago. So a wee while. I moved to New Zealand in 2011.
What's your first language?
So this is a tricky one. I have two first languages. I grew up speaking both Welsh and English at the same time. I would speak Welsh with my dad, English with my mum. So it was I think my brain was a bit confused. I think in both. I go between both, even now living in New Zealand as well, even though I'm not speaking it as regularly. But both Welsh and English were spoken at home. My mum had to learn Welsh to be able to work as a teacher where we grew up. I'd never really spoke Welsh with mum unless it was she's wanting to say something in secret or something if we're in New Zealand, bit of a gossip or something. But she'll sometimes tell us off in Welsh when we were younger, but other than that, I never spoke Welsh with my mum.
Yeah, so how important is Welsh in Wales?
It's so important. Te reo Māori is a taonga. That's similar to Welsh. It's a treasure of Wales. It's not only to my heritage, but everyone else's heritage in Wales, even if some people in Wales can't speak Welsh, but they still treasure the language.
But Welsh hasn't always been so treasured. In 1536, Henry VIII passed the Act of Union, which prohibited the use of Welsh in public administration and the legal system. While the language is undergoing a revitalisation, Welsh speakers are still in the minority. Just over 500,000 people speak it, not quite 20% of the Welsh population.
When my grandma was at school, she wasn't allowed to speak Welsh. They did all their lessons, speaking was in English. And in the 19th century, so like quite a few years before my grandma was born, in the late 19th century, they would have students would be punished for speaking Welsh, and they would have to carry around a sign, like a wooden sign with a WN on, which is the Welsh knot. So if you were caught speaking Welsh, you would be caned, beaten, get that sign around you, and then that sign could be passed on to another student.
That sounds terrible. So that was like every school in the country?
Yeah, every school in the country.
That was like a law that they had to...
Yeah.
Wow, okay. So it seems to have changed a little bit since then.
Yes, definitely. So I think it was 1967, the Welsh Language Act came into place, and that was when both Welsh and English had to be treated as equal. And then I know there was an update to that in 93. Every school in Wales has to teach Welsh, so every student from the age of 4 or 5 to up until your GCSE. So I think that's level 1 here. So 15, 16 has to do Welsh. So it's like English here. But you have to do both Welsh and English. And I have a GCSE in Welsh as a first language, but you also have to do it as a second language. So if you're moving from England or your parents are English and they're not speaking Welsh in the home, you still have that Welsh qualification.
So how is Welsh ingrained to kind of everyday life in Wales?
It's the equivalent to English, like here you've got your schooling is through English. In Wales, the schooling is through Welsh and English. You've got road signs, which I know is the debate at the moment in New Zealand. That's everywhere. Since 93, it used to be that English would be first and then Welsh second. Now it's Welsh first and English second. So you've got them everywhere. It doesn't matter. And it has to be not only road signs, but also signs on public buildings, so schools, offices, like councils, the government. It's also through courts. If you're a Welsh speaker and you feel more comfortable having your case heard through Welsh, that's fine. Same with the government. It's dual, very bilingual. They're treated equally.
Like, do you go into cafes, you go into shops, everything's in Welsh,
Yes.
You go and buy a product at the supermarket, the milk says,
Yeah. So you'll have your big chain supermarkets, but there will be the Welsh milk will have milk is llefrith, so it will have llefrith Cymraeg, which means Welsh milk, and they'll have, similar to New Zealand, that we will have like a little flag or like made in New Zealand or Kiwi products, whatever. But in Wales, it will have the Welsh dragon flag on it, and it'll be in Welsh. You've got local products that are made, which will be in Welsh, but it will also have the English as well. And you can go a whole day without speaking a lick of English. It's very easy to do.
Just say you're going to a sports match, you got Wales and New Zealand playing. Which team do you support?
I support Wales firstly because my mum will probably disagree with me there, but I was born in Wales. That's my heritage. I hold it probably closer than the All Blacks, and Wales is the underdog.
And secondly, what do you shout? What are your words to support?
Well, the Welsh are famous for their singing, so I can hold a tune. I'm not going to sing right now, but it's more singing. It's not, you'll be singing songs that are in Welsh, or Calon Lan, which is a famous one. The national anthem in Welsh is quite strong and powerful, I think. Some words cannot be repeated because they're not appropriate. But yeah, it's jovial and it's never in English.
Dia Yves Galer is Misha Diarmid O'Coffig. Is os Kilorna o Guchastum, agus Tommy Mahoney in Ototahi Christchurch Philoher. Tommy Sanua Halen le Nismo no Fihabli in ish. My name is Diarmid Coffey, or Diarmid O'Coffig is the Irish version. I come from Killarney in County Kerry in Ireland, and I live in Ototahi Christchurch, where I've been for the last 5 years, and in New Zealand for just over 20 years now. I am the Cathaoirleach, or the chair, it's a very kind of, sounds a lot bigger than it is, of a branch of a group called Conradh na Gaeilge, and we are Conradh na Gaeilge Aotearoa, so we're the New Zealand branch of Conradh na Gaeilge, which is an organisation based in Dublin and founded in 1893 to revitalise the Irish language.
Diarmid learnt a bit of Irish at school, but his language awakening didn't happen until he was in Wellington.
This would have been like in my kind of 20 years of not speaking any Irish. So I was in the library, in that Clark's Cafe there, was up in the mezzanine area. Nice coffee they'd have there. And I was just sitting down having a coffee, and I heard a family of people behind me speaking away in Irish, which is not something here too often in Wellington, So I kind of stood up and turned around and walked over to them, ready to dazzle them with my Irish, and I opened my mouth and I realised I hadn't the foggiest idea what to say. I'd forgotten everything. My mind went completely blank. So I kind of just blushed and turned around and walked away, But I never forgot it. I never forgot that sense of I should be able to speak Irish here, but I can't. It's just it gnaws away at you. And I actually told a story once, and someone said to me, I think I know who those people were. They were over visiting me. if I met them again, I'd be more than happy to go up and say hello to them. If I meet Irish people now, just kind of, on a day-to-day basis, it's lovely to just start with a few words, cúpla focal as Gaeilge, and you can kind of get a few words of Irish in.
What does that mean?
That's just a few words in Irish. And so you can start the conversation in Irish, and some people will keep on going and other people won't. And, it's fine either way, but it's just nice to get it out there.
Irish is taught in schools, but beyond that, Diarmaid's exposure to the language was limited.
I grew up in an English-speaking house. I went to an English-speaking school. And my exposure to Irish was through my schooling, where Irish is a compulsory language right from when you start school to when you leave at the end of your schooling. So 12 or 13 years, depending on how long you spend in school. And that's my exposure to Irish, was learned 2.5 hours a week, and over the years became a bit more visible on the television. An Irish language television station started. We have Irish language radio, and I finished school, and people finishing school will usually have a reasonable standard of Irish and be able to carry on a conversation. But then you leave school and there's nowhere to speak it unless you seek it out, and of course most people don't. So you gradually, the knowledge you had, you kind of lose.
So when you were growing up, how prevalent was Irish day to day outside the 2 or so hours you did at school every week?
It wasn't that prevalent. It is on, and it's a topic of discussion obviously at the moment, and one of the things we really want to support. But it's visible in that it's on road signs, it's on buildings. It's the first language of the state, so it's the first official language is Irish. And say for the Constitution in 1937. There's an English and an Irish version. If there's a conflict between them, it's the Irish version that gets precedence. It became part of the kind of nation building as Ireland became an independent, or the Republic of Ireland became an independent country. And it became a compulsory language in school. It was a compulsory language for a long time for civil service employees. But at the same time, all the time, the language in the heartland, in the Gaeltacht regions, was decreasing because of economic factors, people leaving, people emigrating.
Day to day, do you see Irish in, say, the supermarket or a cafe? Could you go into a pub and ask for a pint of Guinness in any pub in Ireland in Irish? Or has it not reached that?
You can. You probably, in a lot of places, will find that people will understand you're speaking Irish to them and will say, Ní hiigim an cheist, or, I don't understand the question, or something like that. But the census results came out literally yesterday, and the questions were asked about people's languages they speak at home and the languages they can speak and so on. So the number of people in Ireland, and it was the first time the question was asked who self-declare now, but the number of people who self-declare that they have a very good standard, a very high standard of Irish, which will, I think, imply fluency in the language, is just under 200,000. So that's out of a population in the Republic of 5.1. But that's 200,000. It's not a huge amount. It's about 4%. So you can imagine if you walk into a room and there's 30 people there, probably 1 or 2 of them will have really good Irish, and another 4 or 5 will have decent Irish. So these are the figures that have come through. So I think that was a slightly surprising number. It's more than was expected. The future, I think, is maybe more hopeful than it has been for a long time. That's not to underestimate the difficulties the language face. It's a vulnerable language, just like Te Reo Māori. But the efforts that the Irish state have made and the efforts that the Irish people have made over the years do seem to bear some fruit. Here in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, we would hope the same thing would happen, because I think a world in which Irish exists is richer than a world in which Irish doesn't exist. And a world in which Te Reo Māori exists is richer for everyone. No matter where you are, it's a richer world when the more languages that exist. And there are many things that are putting them in danger.
The Republic of Ireland itself, are there many kind of arguments against Irish? And if so, what are they? There
is a vocal minority, and it is a minority, and the studies show that around about 70% of the population are very positive about the language. That's a super majority, I suppose you could call it. The arguments you'd hear will kind of focus on the cost. It's too expensive. It's an official language of Ireland. It's an official language of the European Union now, so a lot of documents are translated into Irish, so that costs money, and that the money could be used better for other things. Or a policy that they want to put in is where 20% of the civil service will now be fluent in Irish, and this is a target. And again, this is decried as a waste of time and a waste of effort.
You talk about the kind of arguments, waste of money, waste of time. That's also kind of an argument in New Zealand, isn't it, at the moment? You know, the National Party, for instance, is saying
there's 54,000 potholes in this country, and so rather than generating signs and putting them up everywhere, I'd actually sooner us actually fix the potholes.
Shouldn't we be focused on fixing those rather than doing something that isn't a priority?
I would say that they are fallacious arguments. I think the consultation is very clear that the change in signage isn't going to add any really significant cost or any significant effort. A lot of these signs have a natural lifespan and they'll be changed when they need to be changed. So it doesn't mean the potholes can't be fixed. I think it was disappointing that National took the initial stance that they did and seems still to be kind of fudging it. I'm not a member of any political party, but my feeling, and from discussing it with people and looking online and messages from our members of Conradh and the Gaeilge here, is that the vast majority of people will support it. I think it's a really good thing for the country. It will be something that tourists and travellers to the country will love to see. It gives a great point of difference, when it's done. So it's an important thing to do. It's a good thing to do for the language. The potholes, they'll need to be fixed. But, the sign changing isn't for the roads. It's for Te Reo Māori. It's for us. It's for us to be able to be exposed to the language more and to get an opportunity to read it and see it on a day-to-day basis.
In Wales, in 1993, the Welsh Language Act came into effect. The aim, to ensure Welsh and English are treated equally. It made it a legal requirement for all road signs and other public signage to be bilingual.
Some signs, they used to have English and then Welsh on the sign. Now it's Welsh on the sign first and then English. So you'll have, slow down. Well, you'll have that first in Welsh and then in English.
Well, slow down.
You'll have araf and then slow. And lots of people who go over to Wales will say, how do you say it? It's araf. But it's common to see. It would be very uncommon to see a sign not have the English sign on it as well.
Is that not a safety concern? I mean, that's some of the argument over here in New Zealand at the moment.
I don't think it is a safety concern. Also, if you're driving, you've done the road code. Most of the signs are pictures. The pictures are universal, regardless of what country you go to. In Europe, there's signs in French, Spanish, Italian, and English. What's the difference to having te reo in English? It's the same. I personally am for it. I don't see why anyone would be against it.
Ireland and Aotearoa might be on opposite sides of the world, but there are shared challenges when it comes to revitalising Indigenous languages.
There has been a connection over the years between Te Reo and Irish, because they're both languages which have declined as a result of English, as a result of colonisation. And Irish is often used as a kind of an example language for people who support efforts to revitalise Te Reo Māori or people who do not support efforts. I remember in 2017, David Seymour said that Irish was the Brussels sprouts of languages.
Look at the Irish. They've had compulsory Gaelic for 90 years. It's turned Gaelic into sort of the Brussels sprout of languages in Ireland. People eat it only because they're forced to, and it makes them resent it. And it hasn't actually made big inroads into the number of Gaelic speakers in Ireland anyhow.
At the time, it kind of was one of the things that I suppose inspired us to start Conradh and Gaeilge, because that is an absolute fallacy. The vast majority of people in Ireland are very supportive of the language and wish they had more opportunities to speak it, despite the fact that it is a compulsory language in school, and there are issues with that. But it is a language that is has generally a very positive meaning for people in Ireland, both in Ireland and overseas. And I think it's, the things like that, when you read about them in the media, Irish being used and it was around compulsory learning of Te Reo Māori in school, and Irish was being used as a stick to beat the native language of New Zealand, and I just didn't like seeing that happen. So hopefully we can dispel some of the myths around Irish at the same time as helping people learn it.
So how often do you speak Irish nowadays?
I would speak, so I would say about 3-4 days a week. I'd, get maybe an hour in, and I listen to the radio every day. I've got my favourite sort of shows, and there's people now with whom I've only ever spoken Irish, and I was listening to one of them, was at a meeting, I was watching it online, and he started speaking English, and it just sounded so bizarre just listening to him. So you can create a kind of like what we call in Irish a pobble, a kind of community around you with whom it's natural to speak Irish, and it becomes unnatural to speak English very, very quickly.
Yeah, look, thank you very much, Dermot. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Gurv míle maith agat.
What does that mean?
That means thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Right. Bye.
That's it for today. I'm Tom Kitchen. The Detail is supported by the Public Interest Journalism Fund. Today's podcast was engineered by Mark Chesterman. Our producers are Sarah Robson and Bonnie Harrison. Thanks to Ketrin Lowen and Dermot Coffey. Ka kite anō.